play a game?
Why, yes, I believe we shall.
Oh, I got a live one here.
Welcome to Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, wait, hold on. I mean, getting geeky in Little Rock, it's Shane Plays Geek Talk, a journey into the things we love. I'm your host, Shane Stacks. Thanks so much for tuning in. This week's episode is in a major sweet spot of mine, and my two guests have done something tremendously cool, and I'm so glad to have them. So I'm joined today by Ryan Nead and Marshall Hubbard, who took something I've only heard of in hush whispers and read about on the internet. Most people know the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon from the 80s. Even though it only ran 27 episodes, or should I say 28 now, it got a pop culture, it got a cachet that has been far stronger than the amount of time it ran and the amount of episodes it had. You know, you had the classic Dungeons and Dragons cartoon. Hey, look, it's the Dungeons and Dragons ride. And then the kids, go through the crazy roller coaster ride kind of looking thing. And then boom, they're in Dungeons and Dragons. They're in the realm, which is the realm of Dungeons and Dragons. And they get given magical weapons, / artifacts, and they have adventures trying to get home. Now imagine everybody, even if they've never even seen the cartoon, they've heard of it. It was just one of those things that got out there in pop culture. And some places like guys is it Brazil that still goes nuts over the cartoon, like they're huge fans. Yeah. And that's Marshall right there. So before we go any further, I do want to introduce my guests. So this Ryan Nead. Hello. And then got Marshall Hubbard.
Hey, how you doing?
Who is and Marshall and Ryan are joining me through the magic of the interwebs on Google Hangouts. First of all, I want to thank both of you. I'm so thankful that you made the time to come on with. I was really shocked when you said you hadn't had a lot of podcast requests, interview requests, because so many people are loving what you've done. So I'm really glad that I've been able to engage with you to do this interview. And I know there's a lot of people, my listeners and others that are going to be interested in your story. So what Ryan and Marshall have done, and we'll get into the interview, we'll talk about what was involved, because it evidently took a lot of work. This was not a quick turnaround thing by any means, or just some quick weekend project. It comes out towards the end of the interview, but I wanted to go ahead and highlight it here to give an idea of how much work this was, how much of a labor of love. The project that my two guests worked on took, I think it was upwards of 4 years. So it's no small feat. They put together and put out the final episode that had been written but never produced for Dungeons and Dragons, called Requiem. So, and it's done amazingly well. Everybody who watches this thing is impressed with the quality. It's not, if people make a fan film, then in general, people are more forgiving of it. Like, oh, it's a good effort, whatever. This you can enjoy, like it's really done well. I mean, there's a lot of love and effort put into it. So I want to salute you guys on that.
Thank you.
Before we get into the actual final episode, I want to talk a little bit about, why do we love the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon? Okay, so I want both of y'all to have a chance to talk about that. I love it. What year was it that it came out?
1983.
So I'm 11. I'm 11 when it comes out. And it goes off the air when I'm roughly 13. At the same time, I'm playing, Dungeons and Dragons and role-playing games. So so the cartoon was cool in its own right. I mean, you had these group of kids living in a fantasy realm with fantasy, items and weapons, having adventures. And the cartoon itself was cool. It was, it wasn't just some, phoned in cartoon. They did a good job with it. And then, so at the same time, it's tying in with my love of fantasy and role-playing games and everything. So this cartoon had a a lot of impact for me. And it really hasn't lost that impact over the years. I still love to watch it. You know, I like to talk about it. I've got my DVD here of all the episodes and everything. So I love this cartoon. And it holds up well. When you go back and watch these episodes, yes, I'm no longer 11, 12, 13, right? I looked at them more with an adult eye, more of a jaded adult eye. But they're still pretty darn good. The characters are written well. The adventure structures are good. There's still jokes and humor that still lands well. The realm works for me. You know, my suspension of disbelief, my willing suspension of disbelief is easily invoked when I watch the Dungeons & Dragons cartoon. So, you know, having said that, I wanted to give you all both a chance to answer. So Ryan, what is it you love about the Dungeons & Dragons cartoon from the 80s that you spent all this blood, sweat, and tears producing this final episode of Dungeons & Dragons?
Well, I think it goes back to how I grew up. I lived, of course, in Indiana. I grew up on a farm. My dad worked second shift, so frequently he would get home at midnight and, you know, he'd go to bed, and he wouldn't get up real early on Saturday. So I always had the opportunity to watch Saturday morning cartoons. And at the age, 1983, I would have been 9 years old. And I think at that age, I started to kind of pick up on the fact that Saturday morning cartoons were almost, I felt like they were talking down to me. Mm-hmm. I noticed like the bad guys would always be like bumbling fools. And I started to realize the reason why this was probably happening is because whoever was making these cartoons thought to themselves, children cannot handle scary things. They can't handle a bad guy who's a real bad guy who really is menacing. And Dungeons and Dragons came along. And not only was I impressed with just the concept of it, but the fact that they were taking me seriously. I felt as a 9-year-old, I felt like this is something different. I've not experienced this before. It's always been, of course, you know, we didn't have a whole lot of selection when I was growing up in my area. We could only get a couple of radio television stations.
Yeah, you had like, when I was growing up, before you got cable, before cable came gig, you had 3 or 4 channels.
Exactly.
And Saturday, I want to touch on something that, you know, our generation gets, and generations before us, but generations now, Saturday morning was like golden. That was when you got the kids program. You got a little bit of kids programming after school, but Saturday morning is when all the cool stuff came on. So, you know, that the nostalgia, that fond memories of the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon is mixed in with that. You got up on Saturday morning. You, one, you didn't have to go to school. Yay. But 2, you had all these cartoons you could watch. And so you got your cereal or whatever, and it was just a thing. So, you know, my fondness and feelings for Dungeons & Dragons is all mixed up in that zeitgeist as well, you know? So anyway, so you only had a couple of channels, 2 or 3 channels.
Oh, I only had a couple of channels. So I know that there were other cartoons out there that really had adult themes to them, but we didn't get any of those. So Dungeons & Dragons would have been the first one. And I always liked the concept of somebody from our world being in another world and dealing with it. Mm-hmm. You know, those kids, they were not a part of that world. So they were bringing their experiences from the real world to this one. And I felt like, in a way, you know, that those kids could easily be me. Mm-hmm. You know, I could be in that realm. Right. And, you know, I remember specific episodes as being really impressive to me, but The Last Illusion was just something that even as an adult, as I grew older, even before DVDs came along and the cartoon kind of faded from my memory, I remember the episode where the Presto had a girlfriend. Yeah. And Presto I do remember him picking her up in the end and like swinging her around and holding her. And I thought, as a 10-year-old boy, I thought, this makes sense to me. Right. You know, having a girl to protect. Right. And Presto's a nerd like me. And Presto was a nerd before nerds were cool. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And that was something that always kind of resonated with me. And fast forward over the years, I remember seeing the DVD box set in the store, went and bought it, thought my boys will love this, and went through a nasty divorce in 2010. Oh, and when I had, thank you. When I had my boys on the weekend, I wanted to show them the things that I liked as a kid, and we watched the DVDs. And I remember this is my chance to watch them again. Uh-huh. And I thought to myself, wait a second, that's Willie Ames. Hank is Willie Ames. Mm-hmm. That's the guy from 8 is Enough. That's the guy from Charles in Charge. That's Donnie Most.
Yeah.
That's the guy from Happy Days.
Yeah, I didn't. I never made that connection as a kid. But
never
later,
made the connection.
Yeah.
And when I hear their voices, I'm like, oh, that is amazing. And then I was like, Katie Lee, that's Sunny Gummy. This girl has done all kinds of voice work. And that really impressed me. And so I'm watching all these episodes, and we watch all 27 of them. And I thought, this show is great. I hate that they canceled it. My boys say, Dad, did they ever make it home? And I said, guys, that's what happened in the 80s. They always canceled your favorite show without resolving it.
Yeah.
So I figured what I would do is I would go online and I'd find some fan fiction. Maybe somebody wrote something and I could read it to them. And that's when I stumbled on Michael Reeves' blog where he had the script for the final episode. And I was like, wow, I read it and I've got this goosebumps are like screaming on my skin.
It's a powerful story. I mean, it really is a powerful story. And we'll get into more of the power of the story. And what I want to do is I want to pause there.
Sure.
And I want to kick it over to Marshall here. But we will definitely come back into know, how this thing happened. So Marshall, what you got involved with this, and I don't know the full story yet, but I know that you worked with Ryan and you helped get this thing across the finish line in some way. What is it about Dungeons & Dragons, the cartoon, that you love so much that you got involved, and how did you get involved?
I got involved with a cartoon when it came out in 1983, but also in 1983, being a Dungeons & Dragons player, TSR Hobbies had reorganized into TSR Inc. And at the same time, they released Advanced Dungeons & Dragons role-playing. So we went from D&D, just the normal game system, to now an advanced system. And at the same time, the cartoon was released, TSR being reorganized into what we knew it at that time coming forward. So it just consumed my life in Dungeons & Dragons anyway, as the role-playing game on a Friday night. We would play all the way up until 3 or 4 in the morning, pass out, and we were up bright and early with our cereal on the floor, watching the cartoon come on. And it just blew our mind, because for the first time in our lives, we were seeing something that prior to that we'd only seen in our mind.
Right.
And it really brought the game system to life for us. We would see some of the game mechanics going on. A lot of the artifacts were in the system itself. But just the feel of Dungeons and Dragons, like to elaborate a little on what Ryan was saying, you can see yourself as each one of the characters at certain times, depending on what episode you're watching. Maybe there's something going on in your life at the time. My parents had gone through a divorce right around that same time, so it was a big escape for me to immerse myself in the game system and into the cartoon, and it gave me positive feelings about myself that I could overcome personal tragedy, and watching them do that on the screen was very powerful for me. There's a lot of moral backbone to each one of those characters that you can relate to yourself if you look inside and pick and choose what's going on with you, what's going on with them. And I think it really helped me through some dark times in the early part of my life. The animation, I've been a Japanese animation freak when I was a child. Watched Battle of the Planet, which is also called Gatchaman, but Star Blazers was a big
dude. I'm a huge Star. I like G-Force. But I am a huge Star. In fact, I'm on a rewatch of Star Blazers right now. So huge stuff. Yeah. I'd say the quality of the animation on Dungeons and Dragons was of a higher quality than the average Saturday morning cartoon, like Filmation stuff, right? Is that kind of where you were driving?
Oh yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. And the story arcs at the time seemed kind of childish, but the adult themes behind it kind of crept out at you at odd times in the cartoon. There was a lot of death in the cartoon, which ultimately led to the cancellation of the series prematurely.
Well, I did know that there was a lot of pushback because it was quote unquote scary, or it doesn't seem scary now, but if you're a kid watching other Saturday morning cartoons, the level of threat and violence of consequence was higher than your average Saturday morning cartoon by today's standards, it doesn't seem that big a deal. But at the time, I mean, is you did have characters either die, not main characters, but characters in stories would either die or to be implied have died or had horrible consequences. How did you get involved? How did you plug in with Ryan on all of this?
We were on the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon Facebook group, and he just made a post. Hey, does someone want to help me with some animation and making the last D&D episode? I believe I was maybe one of the only ones to reply.
Right.
This is a little over 3 years ago, maybe 3.5 years ago now. And Ryan said, sure, I have a lot to teach you, and it's going to take us a long time. And I did, at the time, it was more of a hobby, and it became something exponentially more than that extremely quickly, especially when you're looking at trying to build new animation from old animation. And it was an interesting time in my life to go from, I've always been sort of an artist all through my life, but to go to an actual animator was a lot different than I thought it would be.
All right, and we'll get more into the techniques that were used here in a little bit. Ryan, who's your, if you can pick one, who is your favorite character from the series? And I know that's a hard, because they're all written so well that, and they're all so distinct that they all have their good points. But
as a kid, I think I wanted to be Hank, just maybe because I liked his bow and arrow.
Yeah, in fact, we were talking all three of us were talking on Facebook yesterday, and I was like, lightning bow, because that's what I always called it. It's a plasma bow, energy bow. I love that bow so much, especially when he would make like constructs with it. Like he would make he would shoot a bunch of arrows to make like a soft thing for people to land on or whatever. Yeah, I love that thing. He was the one I kind of identified with. No, I didn't identify with him. I like the idea of being him. Yeah. Whereas I thought to myself, I'm basically Presto. Nerdy, a little bit shy, kind of bumbles things, messes up every once in a while. Every once in a while, things work out for him. As I've gotten older, I really feel like I'm Eric. Yeah. I've got his sense of humor and his sarcasm, and I love Eric. And the fact that Eric's role in Requiem was really something that resonated with me more than anything else. Yeah, he had a huge character growth just in that one episode. Eric always had, and I'll answer the same question, but I want to speak to Eric and Hank. Hank, I still think of Hank as older and wiser than me because that's how I imprinted on him when I was a little kid, right? He was, when you're a little kid, 11, 12 or whatever, a 16-year-old can seem like an adult. They just seem so much older and they have it together. I just think of Hank as this older, wise guy, even though what was he like maybe 15 or 16 in the TV show or something. But they did his leadership really well. He was what I call a gentle leader, but a wise leader. And they really brought out, you brought it out, the script brought it out. There were some excellent Hank leadership moments in the final episode. Eric, I probably identify with him most because in my life I've wanted to be good and I wanted to be brave and I've wanted to do the right thing, but I either screw it up or chicken out, more than I want to, right? But Eric always had moments of when push came to shove, Eric would stand up. I remember one episode, I can't remember which one it is. I think it may have almost been that the Dungeon Master was in danger. And Eric was the one that made the big speech that we can't leave this person behind. And he was like ripping and raring to go. And it was such a great Eric moment, so no matter how scared he was, if he saw that somebody needed his shield, he would jump over there and bring that shield up. So yeah, I think Eric's my favorite as well, but I like them all. Like you said, all of them have a good, all of them, every character, is written distinct and well, and they all have enjoyable moments and things. Even Bobby, who could be argued to be the most two-dimensional character, he's a little kid with a club, right? Two-dimensional, no pun intended. He's a little kid with a club. I mean, but he still had moments of nuance that were good, especially with like Uni, and some other stuff. So, and I want to call back to something that Marshall said earlier. He was talking about Advanced D&D was coming out about the same time. I'm sure that there's no coincidence that you had the Cavalier and the Acrobat as classes in the D&D cartoon, when those were not what people thought of as standard go-to classes in D&D. So I'm sure that was to get people to seek out the AD&D books, would be my guess. Yeah, would be my guess. So I want to kick it over to Marshall. Who is your favorite character, if you can pick one?
I would have to say Venger is.
Oh, okay.
Well, even being so young, I noticed something was off with Venger. He would talk about killing the young ones all the time, but something was off with him in the episode, and I can't recall the name of it, where his sister Karina came to the forefront. And to me, she seemed about 10 times more evil in
worse.
her nature,
yeah.
Whereas Venger's demeanor was more evil, and we truly didn't know his nature until about the episode Dungeon at the Heart of Dawn. You were kind of referencing that when Dungeon Master was fading in and out of existence. That's when Eric decided that he was going to do everything he had to do. It was his fault. He was going to make sure that Dungeon Master made it, even if his life had to be lost in the meantime.
Fantastic Eric moment. Yeah.
And at the end of that episode, they'd recharged their weapons. Venger had been recharged. Dungeon Master had been recharged. And then Venger did something that was uncharacteristic for somebody whose nature was true evil. That's why I believe it was just his demeanor that we were seeing up to that point. And his true nature was what he used to be, which is Dungeon Master's son, because at the end of the episode, he gave him a choice: fight with us, stand against the evil that gave you your power and die, or just stay down here in the underworld and die on your own anyway. And he joined the Dungeon Master and the Young Ones to go back to the prime material plane to engage he who cannot be named.
Right.
And at the end of that, that's when he kind of snapped back into, I'm this evil guy now.
Right.
But he always had, he was more he was more lawful evil, if you want to put a class alignment to it. Especially at the end of that episode, I saw something was really off at that. And I think it was an episode or two after that is when you saw that they went to the dragon's graveyard. And at the end of that episode, when Hank was going to kill him and instead allowed him to live, Dungeon Master said, "Rise, my son." At that point in life, I was like, "He said my son. He's never called anyone a son. That's got to be a son." So I kind of knew the premise at that point, and I didn't have anything to base it off of other than what Dungeon Master was saying then. But seeing that his true nature could never have been evil, it was more of a desire for power,
right?
Versus just being truly evil. Like, his sister was pretty much truly evil.
Yeah, his sister was like, "I'm not messing around. I'm Ice Queen evil." Well, it's a big hint. Drawing and animation will do this a lot. I didn't pick it up on it until I was an adult. But in the character design of characters, they will give a hint about something. Like a bad guy's beard won't be full, like it'll have one little mar in it or something like that. That's what they did in Titan AE, just for an example coming to mind. But Venger only having one horn was very significant to his character design. And, if you look, there was some seeding in the series kind of pointing to the fact that Venger might get redeemed or had been good and had gone bad. I feel like that one horn was kind of a hint that he's not fully Venger. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's still... Yeah.
Well, and, Venger had a lot of honor about himself, too.
Right.
And he kept his word. Like at the end of the episode with the Demogorgon, where
Treasure of Tardos, a Demo Dragon.
Yes. And where Shadow Demon and the rest of the army were going to go ahead and kill the young ones, and Venger said no. Basically, I can't remember it word for word, but basically he told them, no, go about your business. I gave them my word. They can go about their business. And next time we meet, your lives are mine type thing. So there were a lot of hints throughout the series that he had a lot of honor about him. He wasn't what his character design visually was truly on the inside. And I think that, Requiem answered that question for just about anyone that can watch it.
Yeah, and and then with that, the beauty of it is, and again, we will touch on this here in a moment. The beauty of it is that the final episode of the cartoon that you produced follows an officially scripted. Now, I know that at the end you added a few like, here's kind of how we would do it. But for the most part, the story that was told is a script. And, as you watch the cartoon, they're hinting towards that kind of story coming. And so if you know what to look for, you can pick up, that the Dungeons & Dragons cartoon Facebook page that you mentioned, I've joined it recently because of this final episode. Somebody else was pointing out a moment that Dungeon Master said something, and it's clearly pointing to the kind of story that the final episode was going to bring. I want to get, you have your final episode that you produced, which that will be linked in the show notes, shaneplays.com. The other people, unfortunately, as people do, some of them are grabbing the video and putting it up on their own channel, which I don't like. I want you guys to get that view count so you know how many people are seeing this. You didn't do it to make money, but I do want you to have an accurate idea of how many people are seeing your video. But I'll link in the video or in the show notes at shaneplays.com. Search for, or, you'll see the link there to watch this Requiem, it's a full-on animated, it's like watching an episode of the cartoon. I mean, incredible effort was made to match it as close to the cartoon as you remember. So it's really well. But what is the YouTube channel that it's under? If people are
it's the channel is called Zetavio DeLorean. Okay, and DeLorean is spelled with like the name Ryan at the end of it.
Oh, okay, funny. Yeah. Okay, so Zetavio, is it Zetavio?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a story behind that name, Zetavio?
Yes, there is. John DeLorean, the guy who created the DeLorean, when they went through his office after he passed away, they found a note where it looked like he had written the word Zetavio on it, and it was written in a stylized way, and they speculated that perhaps that would have been the name of the next car he would have made, Zetavio. And John DeLorean's middle name was Zachary, started with a Z, and his father's name was Tavio DeLorean. So most likely put them together, and I just always liked the way it sounded, so I thought...
Zetavio? Yeah.
Zetavio DeLorean.
Now, and speaking of DeLoreans, I understand you own a DeLorean?
Yes.
Yeah? So how did that come about? How hard was that to find?
Wasn't hard at all. There's a little Auto Trader magazine that was laying at work back in 1996, and I opened it up, and I saw a DeLorean in it, and I said, Dad, let's drive down here to Indianapolis and look at it. And we did, and it was awesome, and I had to have it. So I bought it.
So you got your DeLorean in the day, in
1996.
I would consider that in the day.
15 years after.
There's been an explosion. Well, what I'm saying is there's been an explosion of recent years of people falling in love with 80s culture.
Sure.
And so suddenly everybody wants to buy DeLoreans, but you bought it like a legit DeLorean love, not just like I'm doing 80s culture love. So that's cool.
Well, I had to have one.
Does it still run?
Back to the Future. When I first saw Back to the Future, I knew I had to have a DeLorean one day, and saw it and thought, I'll go ahead and do this. And it's been fun to have. It's been very interesting.
It is a super cool design. I mean, it's a unique, cool. It still looks good. It still looks amazing when you see a DeLorean. So does it run? I mean, can you drive it?
Yeah. I had a coolant leak on it recently, and you have to bleed the system, and I just have not been able to do that. I've been working all the time. I've been busy on other things.
So you had a coolant leak, and you can't find enough plutonium to fix the coolant. So
right.
Do you still love, or are you tired of 88 mile per hour jokes?
Not really. I think of it this way. When people come up to me and they say the Back to the Future jokes, I'm able to put myself in their position.
Sure, they're seeing one.
And their love for the car is something I still have. Yeah, and I know, they don't know that I've heard this over and over and over again. So sometimes I'll throw things back at them, like I'll be like, "What do you mean Back to the Future? Look, is that a movie? I haven't seen that yet." Or I'll just act like I don't know what they're talking about. What? What? And sometimes I was like, yeah, this is the car that was in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, the time travel movie where, he went back to the Grand Hotel. I'll just throw things at him, and just the look of befuddlement on people's faces is fun.
That's cool. So
I'll let him off.
I constantly tag him in a bunch of cheesy 80s with it.
Yeah, well, DeLorean's a sweet ride. I just like you, so many people fell in love with it, went back to the future, because it looked so futuristic. That was a perfect choice to turn that into a time machine. So, all right, back to the present to talk about the past and possibly the future of the D&D cartoon. I'm going to go on record and say that, was it about a year ago, less than a year ago, we had the car commercial.
It was about this time last year.
So it's about a year ago.
Yeah.
Maybe August of last year.
Was it Audi? I can't remember the brand of car.
It was Renault.
Renault. So
or Renault, am I saying it right? Renault?
Well, let's say Renault. Let's sound
okay.
Hey, my good man, it's Renault.
Exactly. I might be pronouncing it wrong.
Renault. I don't know.
It was Brazil anyway. So
it's Brazil.
Exactly.
So they did this commercial. If people aren't aware of it, I will link it in the show notes. About a year ago, it was a live action version of the kids from Dungeons and Dragons card. It had Venger in it. It had, I can't remember if it had Tiamat. I think it had Tiamat in it, or they were fighting the dragon at the beginning or something. And it looked amazing. It looked so good.
Agreed.
I mean, it was absolutely 100% a proof of concept that you could do a live action. And they didn't change up the costumes. They didn't try to update them. They kept it to the original character designs. Everybody looked great. And toward about halfway through the commercial, when they're in the middle of the big fight, Dungeon Master pulls up in a crossover, an SUV. Dungeon Master looks good. The kids jump into the SUV or whatever it is, and they make it home through a portal. And it's a commercial, for goodness sakes. And I almost got a little weepy that they made it home, because they made it home. Yeah. And it looked amazing. And I think Uni got to go with them, even though they established in the cartoon that Uni couldn't leave the realm, if I remember right. So anyway, amazing commercial. Okay. And then you've got, I went and I looked out there and said, what other stuff has been done with the characters and the cartoon? Before I move on, I have to mention, I don't know why, I think we mentioned this a little bit towards the beginning of Marshall and I were talking towards the beginning of the podcast. For some reason, Brazil is crazy about the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon.
It's still played there 7 days a week.
It's just big. Yeah.
Everyone thought that the car commercial, it was being hyped in Brazil erroneously as being an actual live action movie of the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon, and that's what we all thought it was as well.
It looked good.
Everyone was so sure, and when we saw the behind the scenes leaks, we were like, this is amazing. It's now real. We don't have to wait.
But it was a car commercial. But it was a proof of concept, if anybody's paying attention. And D&D is big right now. Role-playing games are big right now. If anybody's paying attention, it's proof of concept that now, I don't know how much it costs to make the commercial. I don't know how much it costs to make it look that good. But it can look that good without having to update into, all the updates on stuff today are cynical, or they try to change it or make it dark. Mm-hmm. If they didn't have to do that, it looked good. So you got that. Brazil's crazy about the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon. A lot of the news coverage I'm seeing of your final episode seems to be coming out of Brazil, or, other non-English language.
Brazil and Spain. There's a couple out of France, Ukraine, Russia.
Can you believe that?
Yeah, it's blown our minds for sure.
Yeah.
That is so cool, man. I'd be so excited if it's getting that kind of coverage. Because sometimes people do that kind of a passion project, do that kind of, and then it just, kind of makes a tiny little and goes away. But I mean, people are paying attention to what you guys have done, up to and including IMDb has listed the final episode.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And they tied it directly to the original series. And on the day that we released the episode, Ernest Gary Gygax's son, was absolutely so stunned by it. He started making his own posts to his own followers, to the D&D community, to the role-playing community at large, imploring them to seek out everyone they can and have them come and watch this episode. That It wasn't something that his dad wanted to approve, meaning Michael Reeves' final script, but seeing as it was canceled, and that we brought it to life as a purely fan-made animation without seeking any monetary gain for it. He was just absolutely floored.
Right.
That stunned me, and I immediately had to get a hold of Ryan and said, "You've got to look at this." And we both were so absolutely overcome with emotion with that, that the animator's son, that the creator of D&D itself, his son just heaped so much praise on it. It was amazing. It was amazing.
I have not heard, and that is amazing. I'm so glad for you. Because when you pour your heart, soul into stuff like that, to get that kind of validation feels amazing. So I'm super glad. I have not heard one critique of it. And I've heard a lot of people talking about it. I have not heard one critique. Everybody says it's...
You mean criticism? Like...
Nothing. Yeah, no, not even constructive criticism.
Well, there's no actual official reviewers that have reviewed it negatively. Yeah. We've had some fan reviewers. Oh, the voices are off. Some of the animation looks a little choppy here or there. Just kind of nitpicking about it, but we accept that. I mean, that's what we want them to do, is say, hey, sure, I would have done this differently this way. You just take it with a grain of salt. In the end, they still watched the entire episode, and they always ended up there, even in a negative critique, it ended up being, and I loved it anyway. Thank you so much. I was crying at the end. Everybody's like, it brought me to tears. It was like it was 1985 again.
Yeah, it gives you chills.
And I'm sitting here, a full-grown man, blubbering like a baby. Yeah. And to be honest with you, Ryan and I too cried. So
yeah.
Well, I mean, there's closure there. There was closure that was never given, and some people may sit back and say, "Well, this is silly. It's just a kids' cartoon." I mean, there were kids that invested into this cartoon in the 80s, and they never got to see the kids go home, and to have them go home, and it's an officially written script that could have been produced for the show. It's not just a script that somebody made up somewhere a year ago, so it fits the tone and what could have happened with the show if it had stayed on the air. And then the level of animation is good. I mean, it's you hit it out of the park. But to kind of tie it back, I was looking through some, what has been done with the show since it went off the air. And I didn't know, Marshall, that it went off the air because of the level of violence. I'd never heard that. So
Tipper Gore led a coalition, Moms Against TV Violence, and they ended up making congressional legislation against it. But one of Dungeons and Dragons, the cartoon series, was her targeted series to see canceled immediately.
I wasn't aware of that.
Immediately, because of supposed references to Satan and the same stuff itself being perceived as being satanic, and there were so many deaths from it, which has since been debunked as utter nonsense.
Yeah, there's the mystique of people dying and all the Satanism around. Now, I'm not saying that some weird person somewhere here and there didn't do something kooky with D&D in their own house or whatever. But this idea that kids were killing themselves left and right and all that, it has totally been debunked. There was there was a pamphlet that went around, that blue pamphlet. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. But it had a list of kids that had killed themselves. And when they tracked it all down, like, most of the names didn't even exist. And they showed that, the one or two kids that had died, there probably wasn't a link to D&D. The Mazes and Monsters movie that was supposedly based on a true story. The stuff behind that, the real person, was so limitedly related to D&D at all that it's not even, there wasn't a connection. So, but in the 80s, I remember my mom was like, you can't play D&D, and guess what? I did anyway because I was a little kid. But yeah, there was a lot of that going around, but I didn't realize that's why the show went off the air. I had never known that. So you had the show, And then you had, you got the car commercial we talked about, the Brazilian car commercial, which I'll link in the show notes. If people just search for Brazilian Dungeons and Dragons cartoon commercial and you'll find it. Renault. Yeah. Also, there was the Forgotten Realms / Dungeons and Dragons comic, the comic book that was put out in the 80s and 90s. Evidently, there was an story arc in it called The Grand Tour, which now I have not read this myself. I'd like to get my hands on it because I love this kind of history. But it featured the grown-up versions of the kids who were still in the realm.
Yes.
Yeah. And Presto asked Elminster, said, can I become your apprentice? And then there was a storyline that followed where Elminster evidently showed Presto, like, are you sure you could handle all of this kind of thing? But it had all they were grown up. It had Hank. It had, Sheila, but they were grown up sitting around in a tavern. And strangely enough, it was kind of jarring to see like Hank is sitting there with his big mug of ale, drinking it, which makes sense because he's older, but that was jarring with my concept of Hank. And then there has been an audio drama of the Requiem final episode that was produced at some point, which I wasn't aware of, and I thought I knew a lot of the trivia. Yeah, go ahead. Were you going to say something about that, Rob?
Oh, I was just, I could explain what that was all about.
Yeah.
I mean, I was going to let you finish your thought.
No, go ahead. Tell us about the audio
okay.
drama.
Well, the DVD box set that came out in 2006 from BCI Eclipse Entertainment contained a radio show, and they had gotten several voice actors to come back or to perform it. And
so it wasn't the cast from the show. It was different.
The only person they were able to get to come back was Katie Lee, who did the voice of Sheila. Everybody else was completely different. Katie Lee also did the voice of Bobby for this particular presentation too. She can do the voice of a 12-year-old boy really well.
Okay.
And it was produced on their DVD. It was like an extra.
Okay. So was it any good? I mean, I've never heard it.
It was perfect. It brought the script for Requiem to life.
Yeah.
The radio show version of it, and I thought it was masterfully done. We used it.
Yeah.
Well, some of it.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I stumbled upon it after I found out that there was a script. In 2010, YouTube was becoming a big thing, and I thought, well, maybe someone has made this episode.
Right. Yeah. Let me make sure. Yeah. Right.
And I went on YouTube and I typed it in, and I had seen some animation that someone had done. Didn't know him at the time, but it's a friend of ours named J.E. Burton, animator, voice actor. He was trying to do it, and I thought, wow, this guy really needs to get it done. And that's also when I stumbled that somebody had uploaded the DVD radio show to YouTube, and I was able to listen to it, and I thought, this is phenomenal. Someone needs to use this and animate it. Somebody needs to do that.
Somebody, and you're looking around, and suddenly you're looking in the mirror. Yeah. Okay. So you've had the car commercial, you've had the Grand Tour comic, so you've had the audio drama of Requiem, which is based on the script as well, and and now you have the animated final episode, which you guys have put out. One thing I neglected to mention while we were recording the podcast is there's also a comic book version of Requiem based on the script by Michael Reeves, and it was from Portugal, so it's in Portuguese. It was also a fan-created product out of love for the series and the show. The show notes for this episode at shaneplays.com, I've got a link to a YouTube video that has the audio drama that we talked about, and as it goes through the audio drama, it goes through artwork from this comic book. And this comic book came out in 2010, 2011, I'm not quite sure when, from Panini Comics. Again, it's a Portuguese fan-produced comic book, so I wanted to give them some love too. There's a lot of people that wanted to see these kids get home. What I'm leading up to is I wouldn't be surprised with all the attention the Dungeons & Dragons cartoon has gotten between the car commercial and what you've done. I wouldn't be surprised as if somebody didn't try to get the D&D cartoon going again. Now,
well, there's always, there's a persistent rumor that there's a live-action movie in the works. There's a reboot for the cartoon series itself. They don't know if they're going to continue from where they left off, if they're going to be older and they come back to their realm, and then they're going to have to reconcile with Requiem over that point. But these rumors are persistent, and every year you'll see multiple updates on the supposed movie, multiple updates on the cartoon. So yeah, it wouldn't surprise me either.
My only fear is, and it's probably what would happen, is so much time has passed that they would reboot it, and I'm afraid that we would end up with a darker, more cynical version, because that seems to be the trend in reboots. But I could be wrong. I mean, you could get the right production team, the right showrunner, and all that, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the case. Hasbro
still owns most of the rights to it, so I'm not sure if they would go the darker route. I'm just not sure about that. Right. I would hope they wouldn't do that.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, because the original cartoon had a core of light at its center, but it had darkness they had to deal with. But it wasn't like as much as I loved the reboot of Battlestar Galactica, it got so cynical. And like a lot of the newer Star Trek, it's done well. I can appreciate the quality, but it seems very cynical. And those are just a couple of the examples I could throw out there that, it's like everything has to be dark and edgy, or else people are almost, like the DC movies that they've done the past few years. They're well done movies, but they're darker than they need to be, in my opinion. So, I would hope that if we did get, and guys, I'm not lying. I'm not just saying this to make you feel good. The amount of attention that you're putting back on the cartoon, it could happen. That could be the final push needed for somebody to seriously do it. So,
well, it would be my hope that they try to recapture the feel good of the 80s. That worked well for our episode. I think it would be astronomically successful if they tried to recapture the feeling that it brought to you on a Saturday morning when you were watching the cartoon back from 83 to 85. And if they try to reboot it now, if they were trying to bring that essence back to life, I think in the dark times we're in, we don't need any more darkness. We have enough.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, we'll have a fun question real quick again, and then we'll go into talking about how this episode happened and the amount of blood, sweat, and tears and all that I think Ryan mentioned at one point that he's literally hunched over a little bit after working on this thing for 4 years. So if, and Marshall, I'll let you lead this time, and then we'll go over to Ryan. I'm going to guess the energy bow or the plasma bow is your favorite. But what is your favorite? And if it's the energy bow, you have to pick a second favorite too. So Marshall, what is your favorite weapon that Dungeon Master gave the kids?
Oh, that's wonderful. I was going to say the energy bow, plasma bow.
Of course, but that's like the default.
Now for 5th edition. Although I do like Presto's magic hat. He always came up with those awesome limericks.
Yeah.
Shim, sham, flim, throw out, a big shim or something, whatever. But that hat, to me, ended up being one of the most powerful artifacts in the entire series. It just had an endless supply of magic that was unbelievable. But I would have to pick the hat.
Yeah, the hat's cool. I always got the feeling that, because Presto with the hat was like Ralph Hinckley. Was it Ralph Hinckley with the Greatest American Hero costume?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Super suit. So much potential, but he didn't know how to use it. So you always got the feeling that if Presto figured out how to use that hat, he could do some damage. So
Merlin had promised him early on in the series to apprentice him and teach him how to harness the true power of his artifact. Of course, that was just Venger. Of course, he ends up doing that very thing for him.
Right. Yeah, in the final episode. I loved how that final episode tied up. Okay, so all of us love the energy bow. I get, who doesn't? What young prepubescent boy didn't love the energy bow? Let's just get it out of the way. So, but Ryan, what about you? Was the energy bow your favorite, or what was your favorite?
Well, yeah, the energy bow was my favorite, but as I've gotten older, I think that Diana's staff is pretty awesome.
It is pretty cool. Yeah.
It's actually... something that I kind of mess around with. I do the Napoleon Dynamite thing. I have pretty good bow staff skills, but part of my job.
Is your favorite animal the liger?
Exactly. Part of my job, I actually work in a factory where I maintain coolant systems. It's a very boring job, but there's a broom handle that we use on a particular job where I've got to string some filter paper in the right spot. And it takes a little while for it to get fed through. And as I stand there waiting on it, I'm usually flipping that broom handle around. And I think, boy, this is just an awesome thing to have,
Right.
And Diana was really good with it. Could do a lot of things. Tried to put some of that into Requiem, some interesting things for her to do with it. So I would have to say her staff.
Okay, you liked her staff. That's cool. Yeah. I think for me, I mean, of course, I loved the Energy Bow. I like Presto's hat, you would think that a younger boy would want Bobby's club. But for some reason, I'm like, okay, Bobby's club, whatever. Eric's shield, to have a shield that can protect you from basically anything and protect others, that was pretty cool. And I loved in the live action cartoon, it looked so great when he used his shield, to protect. But yeah, I guess I'd have to go with the shield with that hat as the third. The problem with the hat is if you bungle it, it can make your situation worse.
Oh yeah, by far.
Yeah, it was sort of almost like a deck of many things in a hat.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right, let's take a quick break to do some show notes and whatnot, but we will be back with Ryan and Marshall very soon as we continue talking about this extremely cool achievement they have done with the Dungeons & Dragons cartoon. Just want to remind folks that the show notes and links and etc. for each episode of Shane Plays Geek Talk can be found on my blog at shaneplays.com. That's ShanePlays.com. Our last episode 230, was The Kill Journal with Adam Lawson, and he was a very interesting guest. Not only is he doing graphic novels and etc., but he's been a writer and producer in movies and television, including having worked on Snakes on a Plane and producing every episode of Tabletop with Will Wheaton and Felicia Day and etc. So really recommend you check that out if you haven't already. It was a great conversation. There's many places to find Shane Plays Geek Talk. Of course, on the blog at shaneplays.com. You can go to iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, Podbean, YouTube. I put it up on YouTube. Some people listen to it there. And more. And now we are on Amazon Music. Amazon Music is a new place to find podcasts, and Shane Plays Geek Talk is there. And last but never least, we are carried on Krypton Radio. Krypton Radio is sci-fi for your Wi-Fi. KryptonRadio.com. There's a couple ways to support the podcast if you want to. I don't try to make a lot of money off of it or anything, but if people want to help or show their appreciation for the podcast, you're always welcome to. We do have a Patreon. Go to patreon.com/ShanePlays, ShanePlays. And another great way that you can support Shane Plays is on Twitter and on my Facebook page. Go to the Facebook page, Shane Plays. And I often post links to like Humble Bundles and other things that will let you get cool stuff, software, books, comic books, whatever, games at a great discount. And if you use my affiliate links, it helps me out. I have 2 Twitter's accounts because on one of them, I'm just yap, and I never shut up. And I know some people don't want that. And my other one is very meat and potatoes. I just put the updates on there. So if you want the yap and every little thought that comes into my fevered fingers to type out, follow Shane Plays on Twitter, ShanePlays. If you want just the meat and potatoes, follow Shane Plays PR, ShanePlays PR. And last, big shout out to Cursova Magazine. Cursova Magazine, CIRSOVA Magazine. They do adventure fiction, pulp fiction, all kinds of cool. If you love D&D, if you love swords and sorcery, if you love the old pulp magazines and writers like, Edgar Rice Burroughs and that vein, H.P. Lovecraft, etc., then check out Cursova Magazine. And every cover has spectacular art. So it's a CIRSOVA Magazine. All right, that's it for the show notes, and let's get back to the discussion with Ryan Nead and Marshall Hubbard about their fan-created final episode of the Dungeons & Dragons cartoon from the 80s. All right. Well, let's do this, guys. Let's tell the story of the final episode. What Ryan, at what point did your switch go from somebody should do this to I'm the one who's going to do this? How did that happen?
Okay, let's see. 2016.
That's a big question.
Okay. It was in 2015. 2015, my son comes home from school and says, "Dad, I'm in a film class in school." And I was like, "Really? That sounds interesting. What kind of stuff do you have to do?" And he explained that they had to like make a trailer, a commercial, and then for their final project, something really big. And I was like, "Ooh, I should help you with this." And I did. And we filmed some stuff. And I had talked to a buddy of mine about, give me a good video editor, preferably free, that I could do some editing. And he told me that there was one called HitFilm online, and it was fantastic. And I downloaded it, and it was great. You could do all kinds of stuff with it.
Hit, because I'm sure there's people listening who are
sure. HitFilm.
HitFilm. Okay,
it's a free to download. They make their money by selling plugins for the various things it'll do, but it's already got plenty of features on it. And we made a Ghostbusters movie. They were throwing lightning or their neutrino wands and everything, and I had uniforms for them and everything, and it was it did pretty good. It turned out pretty good. Well, after it was over, I realized, man, I really enjoy this video editing stuff, and it just occurred to me. I was like, wait a second, the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon, and I had thought, they used to reuse animation all the time. They did it in He-Man all the time. They did it in I really noticed it in the Star Trek animated series.
Yeah, those were both Filmation.
Yeah, Filmation. They would reuse the same scene over and over again. And I thought, well, why don't I do that for Requiem? And that's kind of how it got started. And I just took my DVD box set and I transferred all of it to digital. And I would start going through the episodes as fast as I could on my timeline. And I would know, okay, I need Hank running. I need Eric upset. I need Sheila mad. I need Diana upset. I need them flipping, jumping. And I would grab scenes and start trying to organize them. I need Venger talking to Dungeon Master. Where are they at? Well, they're in an area with columns and like Stonehenge-like area. Well, I had to find that because I couldn't draw it. There was no way I was going to be able to draw it. And I knew that there was no way I was going to be able to do this unless I cheated every step of the way. Find something else where I can pull from all kinds of places. And I felt like, I know they don't like it when you take things from other people's work, but I was taking little bits from everywhere. I thought no one's going to care. So, there's an episode of Thundercats where I found Stonehenge-like structures and I recolored them and I made the Plane of Dreams and had Dungeon Master talking to Venger.
And I think that I want to stop there as long as your intent is not to make money.
Sure. Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. Now I want to put, there's some bad actors out there that have taken your video and are trying to sell DVDs of it or something like that. And
one was my friend.
Was it really? Yeah,
one was my friend based out of Brazil. I'm not going to name him. I'm not going to name the group that he had me the admin of until I accused him of outright thievery just the day before yesterday. I believe that was it, Ryan.
Yes.
So I tagged him on the post, and he was selling it for $19 US on a DVD, and he had a little clip, and it just absolutely horrible. It looked absolutely horrible, and he was trying to monetize it for himself, and we put some of our buddies who are in Brazil onto the task of going onto all their sites and kind of bombarding it with, their local law enforcement. Hey, look at this. This is illegal. This guy's making money off this. Because Ryan and I make zero.
Right.
Zero.
And that's why I'm bringing it up. If anybody sees the final animated episode for sale somewhere or in any way whatsoever, somebody's trying to make money off of it, it is not Ryan and Marshall. Ryan and Marshall did this as a labor of love for themselves and the fan community. So I want to make it real, even though the amount of work they put into it. Now, legally, it would be very spaghetti to get to a point where they could make money off of it. But that's not why they did it. The amount of effort, certainly the amount of work they put in, if they were in the industry or something like that, would justify, it wouldn't be wrong for them to ask for money philosophically. But legally, they're not trying to go there. right? They did it as a fan community thing for themselves and for others to enjoy. So I want to make that real clear so nobody accidentally, well, these guys are out there trying to make a buck off something they don't own. That's not the case here. So anyway, Ryan, I had interrupted you. You were saying you were grabbing animation where
you would ask more of the feelings that I had about it as far as, what made me decide to do it.
Right.
And there, like I had mentioned earlier on YouTube, I saw that someone else had tried it. One of the things I noticed this person was doing was drawing it by hand. And I thought, wow, 24 frames per second, 30 minutes, holy cow, that's going to be a lot of drawing for one person to do. And it seemed like this person just wasn't getting to it, wasn't getting it done. And I thought, well, life gets in the way. And I've seen fan films come and go before. And I thought, he's not going to get it done. Maybe I'll, throw my hat in the ring. And, started working on it. I think there was like a mystique to it. The idea that nobody's crazy enough to do this, but I'm going to do it. Right. And as I started working on it, there was times where I thought, do not think about how much work this is going to take.
Right. Yeah.
Put that out of your head and just look at everything as, what am I going to do today? What am I going to do today?
You eat an elephant one bite at a time. Yeah.
And pretty much how it happened. Yeah.
What is it? There's a saying something like eating the elephant one bite at a time. One bite at a time.
How do you eat an elephant?
Okay. So did you get into where obviously you found scenes and you found references that you could use, but did you get into where you were doing frame by frame animation to fill some of the stuff in?
Okay, here's kind of how it worked. Like, let's say that in the original footage, you have got Hank speaking. He's talking, his mouth is moving. There's nothing else moving on the screen except for his mouth. Then he turns his head to the right, and then he snaps it back to the left. I got my directions correct. What I would do is I would look at each one of those frames and I would get the best one, because usually what they would do is they would animate on twos. What that means is instead of for 24 frames per second, they would have two images that were the same. The next two images would be the same, and they would be doubled up. It's how instead of each frame being slightly different, every other frame was what was slightly different. But I would throw out the ones that looked good, keep the ones that, backwards. I keep the ones that look good, throw out the ones that didn't, and I'd use them as like an image file, and I would just cut out around the character that I needed, and I would have a transparent background. Then I would rebuild that. What
were you using as your image editor?
My phone. I have got I've got an app on there called Autodesk Sketchbook, and I would pull up the file, just an image. Using my stylus, I would erase. I'm making an erased line around the character. That way I could have a definitive line where the character is and where the background is. From there, I could take that image back into my computer and get rid of the background, and then I've got the character on a transparent background that I can put in a new environment or situation. So just a really quick and easy way of how it worked. And once I'd have them in that, they would move as they did in the original footage, but there would be no background. And then I could take them and put them on another background. They're able to move around. Sometimes I would stop them on a certain frame and animate their mouth so they would be talking, and then I'd have them move a little bit more. And I'd try to do lots of things to make it look different than it originally looked in its original context. Flip it horizontal. Sometimes I would run the action backwards, and if they weren't walking, then that would work. If they're walking, it looks like they're walking backwards, which wouldn't work. But if they're gesturing or, turning to the right or turning to the left, sometimes you could play the frame backward, and it just made it look different. That's just the easiest way to explain it.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, it sounds, so were you just kind of going by the seat of your pants, or were you storyboarding ahead of time, or like what?
Most of the things I had in my head. See, I've got a 20-minute drive from work to home, and I would listen to Requiem, the radio show, on my way home, on my way to work, to the point where I had it memorized. So I had in my head everything that I needed, and things like I thought I wanted to see. Like I would need to have, when Hank and Eric were fighting, I knew that where Eric needed to be standing, where Hank needed to be standing, what needed to be in the background, and I'd start to work on it, when I got in front of my computer, and I'd put things together, and if it looked good, I'd keep it, and I'd build off that. But no storyboarding at all. And I couldn't really storyboard because half the time I didn't know what the next scene was going to look like. I knew it had to happen in the scene, but I didn't know if it was going to be like a close-up shot from the, like a headshot from the torso up, or if it was going to be from the feet, where the feet and the head would be visible. I just didn't know how that all was going to be laid out. But it was lots of sometimes trial and error. I would think something was going to work. I would have transparencies of everything, and I put it all together, and it's crap. It won't work. It won't work. I can't use this. And I'd have to take these images and I'd throw them into a transparency folder for possible use somewhere else. And then I'd have to go try to find what would work in the situation that I wanted to have done.
All right.
Yeah, so hey, Marshall, you're never going to guess what I had to do with about 80 hours of work you did.
Yeah. And it's kind of like when Marshall came in, having him along, boy, I don't know if he's ever heard me say it this way, but I knew that I was sending him stuff, knowing full well that a lot of it I wouldn't be able to use. But I knew it wasn't that I knew I wasn't going to use it, but I knew, man, some of this stuff I think it's going to work, but it might not. So I would send him things because I thought it would work. I put it on there. It's not going to work. I need something else. And there were times I had to tell him, dude, everything you've done in the last month, I can't put it anywhere. It's not going to work. And he'd say, well, but if Marshall wasn't on board, that would have made me crazy. The idea that I was constantly having to doing all this work and not able to fix it for me. But by being able to delegate it to him, having Marshall is the reason why it looks as good as it does. Because I was able to look at the best stuff that I had.
Right. It gave you more stuff to choose the best from.
Yeah. If I had cut something out and spent a week doing it and found out it wouldn't work, I would probably try to cut a corner and make it work and not be happy with it. Whereas with Marshall, I could say, dude, that you gave me doesn't work. Do something else, and he did. And he trusted me, and he just, everything I asked him to do, he did. And I would send him clips and I'd say, what do you think? Marshall's he's always gracious, but at the same time, I could just tell if something wasn't right. And he'd be like, well, okay, if you're cool with it, I'm cool with it. I'm thinking, I need to fix this.
That's not exactly, I hear you.
But when I would send him stuff and he'd be like, dude, I'm like in tears. This is great. And there were times I thought, was he blowing smoke at my rear or is he serious here? But it seems like his consensus was everyone else's consensus too, that it really looked good.
Yeah, it looks very good. So
I actually had when Ryan would send me a clip. I have a buddy at work who's an avid D&D game master himself, and I would use him to give me advice on it. So if it elicited any type of emotion out of him, I just translate that into my own, step back from it, look at it again, and kind of really analyze it a lot more than I would just my own. So when I could give Ryan a report on it, it wouldn't be just my emotions that I'm trying to convey about what I'm watching, because you have to remember the whole premise of the cartoon is we wanted to elicit the emotions that you still held that were latent from 1985 in the whole being in your soul. And my friend, his name is Brad Kerner, by the way, him and his wife, Linda Love, and my wife, April, as well, we all would watch these clips, and I would just question them, and then I would get back to Ryan on it. And I didn't want to hurt Ryan's feelings, but we needed the flow of ideas to be positive, and I wanted to keep him positive about it because he had a lot on him, and this labor of love, it seemed like a second career.
Yeah.
We had, we were trying to get the thing produced to the mass fans and stuff. So, it's kind of an artificial deadline in your own mind, but I also didn't want him to dwell too much on something that no matter what you're going to do, it's just going to come out pretty much in that way. But maybe if you look at it a different way and has a masterful ability in his mind, he's got a cinematic mind,
sounds
I guess
like
what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, it sounds like it, the way he was thinking about stuff on his drive. So, Ryan, how far into the process Because at some point you went online and said, anybody want to help me with this? How
Yeah.
far into it did you get before we went, I really wouldn't mind getting some help here?
Well, at the time, when I was cutting out images, I was using HitFilm's masking tool, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it involves basically using your mouse to point and click and draw this blue line around the character. All right.
Okay.
And it took forever. And I got to thinking about a year into it, I thought, I am not going to be able to get this done anytime soon. I need to get someone to help me out. And there was a part of me, of course, that thought, boy, it'd be great if I just soloed this and everybody could, heap all this praise on me. And I had to kind of rein in my ego and thought to myself, it's really not about me. I'm trying to do this for the fans. Because if there's other people out there who think, man, I wish that cartoon had gotten an ending, then I want to, do that for them. So I was able to put together what I call the Plane of Dreams sequence, which is really like the first sequence of Requiem. And I uploaded it to YouTube, and I put on there, hey, this is a proof of concept. If anybody has any experience with like video animation and would like to help out, give me a call. And it was shared to the Facebook fan page by John Ray. And John had commented on the YouTube page saying, hey, this looks great. I shared it to the fan page. And I don't know why it never dawned on me to look for a fan page on Facebook. So I go to the fan page and I joined and became part of it. And I was kind of going to lay low for a while. And I did notice Marshall commenting. And it was kind of weird because I would talk about stuff, but not identify me as being Zetavio DeLorean. I was just Ryan Nead. And I talked about it a little bit. Then eventually I said, okay, yeah, that's me. And by then I'd figured out how to do it on my phone, which was making things go a little bit faster. And Marshall got hold of me and said, hey, I'll help you, whatever you want. I'll do it. And
okay, I got to stop you there. Hold on. Okay. I got to cut over to Marshall here. Marshall, what was it about this that engaged you so much that you were immediately like, okay, I'll help you. How can I help? I mean, what was because he didn't get a lot of response evidently from people offering to help, but you jumped right in. So what was going on there?
The attention to detail with the clips that were being posted, the way he was speaking about it, I kind of knew he knew more about what he was talking about than what he was letting on at first. And so I just kept at it. The brilliance of the way he would talk about it would be like you speaking to someone who was an original animator on Thundercats, or I'm a friend of Larry Kinney's who played Lion-O. Be like talking to him. That person knows what they're doing. It's not a joke to them. This is something that's very serious. And he was asking for help at the end once he said who he was. So I was like, oh, well, I kind of knew that, but
right.
Yeah, I'll give you whatever help you need. I absolutely love the cartoon, and I love the energy that he was giving off in his posts. You know, he loved it as much as I did, if not more.
Cool.
So I felt that I needed to give myself that and share in the creation of something that I've been waiting since 1985 to see, and have gone through many D&D adventures, with the own groups that I used to play with, about what the ending would be like, So I thought, well, you know what, Ryan, I'll go ahead and sign on, man. Just send me whatever you got. You're going to have to school me on this animation, which he did many times, and it worked out well for us, And I do want to say that when Sheila and them were on the beach on those when I cut out the frames for you, about 15 to 20 seconds of that, I actually got my daughters, Charlotte and Scarlett, to cut those out for me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. My wife, April, said, well, look, they're watching you do this hours on end. Can you show them how to do it? And being the wonderful mother that she is, a beautiful wife, by the way, she pushed me to bring my daughters into it, and I kind of hearkened back to how Ryan's original post really touched me about it, and then I was like, you know what? I'm going to share this with them. And I had the same feeling when I was reading his post. They just had that energy about them. I just couldn't look away from it. I was like, is he going to post again? Where'd he go? What's going on? I'd make a comment. Hey, where are you at? So he finally got to me, and I just came on board, full bore with it, whatever he needed.
So Marshall jumped in. started helping with a lot of the animating, the sound and sound design. So it sounds like you referenced some of the audio drama for the sound. Was there any other sound that you needed to create on your own or to clip out of other cartoons, or, how did you handle that?
Okay. As far as the audio drama, the DVD audio drama, I believe that the voice actors did a good job. Not all of them sounded exactly like the characters, but I don't think you could expect them to.
Right.
It's hard to sound like somebody else, but
Right.
I think they all did a good job at capturing like the essence of who the character was, the cadence, the personality. The problem lied in the company that did the work on the DVD audio. They apparently had access to a musical soundtrack from the episode The Night of No Tomorrow and The Servant of Evil. It was the audio track with sound effects, but no dialogue. And what they did was they took this audio track and they played it in the background. The problem was there were sound effects all over the place from the original cartoon that didn't jive at all with what was happening within the DVD radio show. For instance, you can kind of hear sometimes in the campfire, somebody's walking around while Eric's speaking, but there's nobody walking around. The same thing when Hank's on the dragon. There's people. There's some footsteps that are happening in the middle of Hank's speech, and there's nobody walking on the dragon. So there was some problems with the DVD radio show that needed to be worked on. Some of the things I could do things about, other things my hands were tied. There was just nothing more I could do.
Right.
I went in and erased all the narration because we don't need a narrator. We see what's happening on screen. I had to replace Presto's voice. The reason why I did that was because Presto was going to say new lines at the end, and I knew that there was just no way that I could switch a different actor. Just one actor from the DVD radio show and another actor doing the voice of Presto in the end. It would be too jarring. So I had my son step into the role. It's a 15-year-old kid who doesn't sound like Presto, but he sounds like a 15-year-old kid.
Right.
Who's scrawny and his voice cracks every once in a while. And I felt like, he did a really good job, in my opinion.
Well, I think he did. When you first hear it, you're like, oh, that's not Presto's voice.
Yeah.
But then a few minutes into it, you stop. Because it's a Presto voice, right?
Exactly.
It's not Presto's voice from the cartoon, but it is a Presto voice. It's a voice that would work for Presto. So after a few minutes, you stop even noticing that.
Another thing that had happened was there was at Pensacon in Pensacola, Florida, there was a D&D show where Katie Lee and Willie Ames were there to talk. And Willie Ames, the voice of Hank, Katie Lee, the voice of Sheila. And a friend of ours from the Facebook fan group was there. And I had sent her a clip of the campfire scene and said, go to them and show it to them and ask if they would reprise their roles, if they would get hold of me. Because I thought, wouldn't it be great if I could actually get Hank to do it? The real Hank, Willie Ames. Wouldn't it be great if I can get Katie Lee? And both of them saw it. According to my friend, Willie Ames seemed to be interested in it, but I never heard from him. Lee, however, got hold of me immediately, said, yes, I will redo all my lines, which was...
Wait a minute. So Katie Lee's voice in this is not from the audio drama. She recorded for you.
Okay, some of it is, but some of it is not. About 80%.
Excellent.
Yeah, well, the reason is like I was mentioning earlier, how there's footsteps in the wrong place, certain things like that. A lot of it also had to do with timing issues. Very hard to explain. It has to do with like when a character says something and the other character responds. On the DVD radio show, they would respond immediately, usually. But in the cartoon format, we really needed to have the other character reacting briefly before they, because people think before they speak. And I needed to show that. The problem is when you've got music running in the background and you try to separate out those two dialogue pieces, it creates a gap where you can't really line the music up anymore because there's a big gap in the middle and it won't flow correctly. By having Katie Lee re-record all of her lines as Sheila and Bobby, it eliminated so many issues.
Wow.
And then what was amazing,
just did it out of the fans.
I offered to pay her.
Yeah.
And she was like, no, thanks. I'm not interested.
How sweet.
Her daughter, Laura, on the DVD radio show did the voice of Diana. and she was like maybe 14 at the time. And she's like almost a 20, maybe a 28, 30-year-old woman, and was able to redo her lines. It still sounds exactly the same. So now I have the new Diana.
Oh, so she did Diana for you. So you got new audio for Sheila, Bobby, and Diana. Okay.
Yes, and then Presto from my son. So having those 4 people really helped out a lot as far as lining up music and things like that, and just making it sound and flow better.
I tell you, I'm sure that Katie Lee has heard this a lot. I had such a crush on Sheila. I had such a major crush on Sheila.
Yeah,
exactly.
I don't know what it was about Sheila, but yeah.
The red hair, buddy. It's the red hair.
Yeah, I guess. But yeah, I had such a crush on Sheila. So that was really nice that the voice actress, that reprised that. So you're able to solve your sound issues.
Some of them, some things I just, there's nothing I can do about.
But, sometimes, now look, nothing is ever perfect. Even quote unquote professionally produced stuff, has problems. I bet you a lot of this, I used to, I lived with some guys that were in a band. So I was around them a lot while they practiced. And a lot of times I'd go to their shows and stuff like that. And they would always beat themselves up over stuff nobody else noticed. They're like, I missed that. I'm like, dude, nobody, I didn't notice. Nobody noticed, So I bet you a lot of the stuff that you're beating yourself up over, nobody even noticed. So,
funny story with that one too. On the day that we released the final episode to the world, Ryan gave it to me to do like a final editorial review of it. And he wanted to know, what do we need to redo? Where are the sound problems, cinematic problems, etc. So I sat and I watched it all the way through. I watched it all the way through 2 times. On the second time, I focused on the ending. I want to say the last maybe 8-9 minutes, all the way through the credits, and I wasn't finding anything that needed to be redone. If we left it to Ryan to review or release, he'd still be reviewing it today.
Right.
Yes. Yes.
So I finally, I called him up and said, look, it was hard to talk through the tears on it because it was complete. There's nothing else we can do for this. There's absolutely zero that we could change. And there's nothing I wanted to change at that point. So I left it up to him to go ahead and release it to the public, and he did it almost immediately, and it exploded, absolutely exploded. But Ryan, he's his biggest critic. Absolutely, he is his biggest critic, and his attention to detail is second to none. So, but at that point, there was nothing else that could have been done to it. I love it. There are hundreds of thousands of other fans that love it. You guys love it. I don't think
it's good.
He asked me once in a while, so what do you think? I'm like, buddy, it's mind blowing. I really can't put into words. The reception that it's got is just amazing. Absolutely amazing. So
yeah, I was going to talk a little bit about the writing choices that were made, because you put a bow on a couple of things that weren't in the script. Mm-hmm. I want to talk about that, but as long as we're on the subject, what was the immediate reaction, and were you surprised when you put it out? Like, what were you expecting and what happened? Where like Ryan, were you hiding under the bed thinking that people were going to come after you saying, you've ruined our childhood? Or, what, or were you expecting people to like it?
There was a part of me. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. And Marshall, I want your thoughts too. Like, what were you expecting versus what happened? So let's let Ryan go first and I'll take it to you.
I assumed that it would be a small group of people that would really appreciate it. They'd be like, "Yeah, this is really good, Ryan. We love it. We're glad you did this." And I would have, not a lot of views, but, that it would, it's kind of hard to put into words. I think I tried to be cautiously optimistic about it. I knew that people would probably enjoy it. I knew that some people might not like it. They might get mad at things. I really just wasn't sure 100% how people would react. Fandom is kind of a crazy thing sometimes.
It really is. Yeah.
Like, for instance, I think about like Star Wars and the recent movies and how it's divided people so much to the point where, well, it's ruined Star Wars. No, it hasn't ruined it. It's great. And it's like,
right.
Fans could be pretty.
It's like people just want to be angry these days.
Yeah, it seems like it sometimes. And I was ready for that.
So you went to your computer or your phone or whatever it was with butterflies, and you're like, oh, I almost don't want to look, but how many people have seen it and what kind of response? And
what happened? Like in the first day, I mean, Marshall, do you remember? When did we hit 10,000 views? Was it within the first day?
I believe it was within the first 9 hours.
Originally, I had said I was going to just release it on the Facebook fan page, and that I would make the YouTube page unlisted, meaning that you would actually have to go to the fan page to get to the link that led to YouTube. And I told them that I would just do that for a week, that the people on the fan page could look at it. That way, I thought, if they say, Ryan, you've got a big problem here, I could pull it down real quick.
Okay.
But after about 4 hours, people are sharing it, and everyone seems to like it. And Marshall mentioned to me, Ryan, this kind of looks like you have to be part of a special group to see this, and legally that might not look real good to some people. So maybe we just need to make it public. And I was like, go for it, and clicked public. I know that within 12 hours, I had gotten sent subtitles of all the dialogue in.
Oh, who did that? Who did?
His name is Arthur Barbaro, gentleman that lives down in Brazil. He just jumped on it immediately and translated everything and sent it to me. And
I want to say that the English subtitles I was super impressed with.
Yeah, he did that too.
I watch everything with subtitles. That's just what I do. And I noticed that the quality of the subtitles was above average on your video. I was actually I was like, wow, that's because it's an even deeper level of, I don't know, professionalism, respect for the product or whatever when you have these great subtitles there. So
Arthur did both. He did the English subtitles and the Portuguese. So
and he sent on you, Arthur. Arthur. Yeah. So okay, so it exploded, continued to explode. It has the true mark of success, which means that people have copied it and are putting it on their own YouTube. And then you've gotten really strongly positive press from English-speaking, Spain, Brazil, whatever. Mm-hmm. I think you said, you mentioned some other areas. Has that been surprising?
No, not to me. We had figured out early, I had figured out, like, when I became part of the fan page, that there were lots of fans in Brazil. And I'd even seen, like, a video of a parade down in Brazil where they had a float that was done up to Caverna do Drago. And I couldn't believe it. There was people dressed as Venger and the kids, and they were on a float, and it was modern day. And I thought, wow, this is pretty amazing. They really like it down there.
Wow. Okay. So, I'm talking about just, it's cool that you got from Brazil, but I'm just saying the press in general that you've gotten has been overwhelmingly positive. Yeah. It keeps coming. Are you waiting for the other shoe to drop, or are you like, wow, they really like me, or like it, or, Marshall, you speak to this too. I mean, has the amount, I have a feeling that you both suspected that among the core fandom that you would get some love. But has it been surprising how far beyond that it's gone?
It has. When it initially dropped, I wanted, of course, Ryan to like it and myself to like it, but I was really, really pushing for my children to like it. They had screened some of the rough cuts with me. We're talking 8, 9, 13, and 16-year-old kids. And, of course, my wife, April, she remembers the cartoon back in the 80s, so I wanted her to feel like it was 1985, and that was my immediate concern. And as I watched the Facebook page throughout the day and the viewership that had just kept increasing, it kind of blew my mind. We were starting to get messages from, like I said, Ernest Gary Gygax, and a few other celebrities that had just stunned me, that not only did our fans on the page enjoy it, people around the world were starting to enjoy it, and from there it just exploded into like 100,000 within a week, and it just kept getting bigger. to South America, to Europe, all the way Chinese commentators that were their English was broken, obviously, but you could just tell they were floored by, absolutely stunned that this had occurred. So I myself was genuinely shocked when Ryan and I were tagged on a couple bona fide news movie review site, English and other countries, and then when IMDb contacted me about putting that officially on their site due to it being from the original script. We weren't stealing anything. It's not monetized, but it's done so well that the continuity from the original series to the episode that we brought to life is so masterfully done, according to all the fan reviewers and the official reviewers out in the world. Once it was put onto that, and I went to it, and I'm seeing my name, I'm seeing Ryan's name, I'm seeing his wife's name, I'm seeing Michael Reeves' name, and it's tied specifically to the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon. I was just floored. I was stunned. There's a couple sites. One is in Spain, one is in Brazil, one is in, I think it's Argentina and Portugal, where they have millions of views because people are ripping off our site and put on, which I told Ryan when he first came to me with this, I said, look, buddy, if you thought this wasn't going to occur, it's wipe that away, because I knew this was going to occur. And I said, look, nothing for nothing. We're in the credits. We know that brought the episode to life. Just let people enjoy it.
I agree. It's a fact of life that people are going to grab stuff and re-upload it. It is, in a sense, it's just more objective validation of how popular it is. And so I don't know how to stop it. People do it, on your own channel. I'm looking at YouTube right now. It's closing in on 500,000 views. So, I think you've done a fantastic job. Okay. we're already, we've gone longer than I intended to, but there's a lot to cover here. I want to kind of draw us down. It's obvious that it's gone big. And hopefully it'll continue going big for you. So, I want to talk a little bit about the writing, and then unfortunately we'll have to, we could keep going. I know there's probably people listening to this that are fans of what you did, or the cartoon that would want me to go blow by blow through every scene, through the thing. And I just, we just don't have time to do that. But to touch on the quality of it that was mentioned a while ago, there are multiple extended scenes in this final episode, this 30 minutes, that you could watch minutes on end. And other than maybe the voices being different, you would have no idea that you weren't watching one of the original episodes if you just happen to see it on TV or something like that. It's also this episode, I call it, or I don't call it, I kind of think of it as like, it still has the same spirit of the cartoon, the same, but it's a little on a slightly bigger scale. Not like that the animation is different because of more budget, but the grandness of the storytelling is bigger. Like Presto using his hat to make a ship fly, and the others flying on a dragon, and the conflict between Hank and Eric. It feels like the story was written for a year or two older audience than the original D&D, right? Cartoon. Not that it's gory or anything like that. It's just, it's even more...
It's more mature.
It's more mature. It's more resonant. The scene where you see Hank say, Eric, it's fine if you want to be leader. It's fine. Be leader, because he knows that de-escalating the conflict is more important in the group than him being in charge. But then you see his hand clench really hard, when everybody walks off and that sort of thing. And then the argument between Hank and Eric at the end felt real, and then Eric ends up, finding his better self, and then, talking about and there's spoilers here, people. I'm not going to try to spoil too much, but we've already said the kids get to go home, and it turns out that the entire realm was basically a prison of sorts. And so there's some really deep storytelling. I want to give a couple of nods. I'm assuming that this was you, Ryan, and Marshall doing this, because you had a script to go off of, not art or storyboards. You worked some visual elements from the cartoon into the final castle or tower or whatever it was. Like there was an opening that was the dragon from the roller coaster ride. Yeah, and then the final door that had to be open looked exactly like the opening title stuff. Every opening cartoon had that, and there was like kind of a brass plate thing, and you put that on, and I was like, that is wonderful. Those are just little details that you just, it's just so great, I don't want to go too deep into the story because there may be people that haven't seen it yet, but the kids do go home. Venger is redeemed, which was kind of being hinted at. And then you added, after the script ended, you added a couple of moments about who goes home, who stays, and you put a little bit of coda on the end of it.
Yes.
So I want to speak briefly to that, and then I got to wrap us up. So Was that all you, Ryan, or was that you and Marshall working together?
This was when Marshall first came on board. I had told him that one of the things that I had noticed was other presentations of this script on YouTube, the DVD radio show. Somebody had also synced it with a comic book that had been done, which is excellent. But I noticed in the comments, lots of people were saying, so what did they do? Did they go home? What's the deal? Why didn't they answer it? And it was left open-ended in the script that Michael Reeves wrote. He was instructed to leave it open-ended, just in case they ever had a fourth season. And I saw those comments so many times that I thought, I'm going to upload this cartoon, and people are going to downvote it, not because of the quality, but because they don't like the open-ended part, even though the open-ended part is exactly what the script says. So I got to thinking, and it was kind of hard to decide whether or not I really wanted to do something like this, because it almost might come across that I'm trying to improve Michael Reeves' script, which I wouldn't want to do.
Well, I thought, let me just say, I'm glad you did it. I thought that it fit the spirit of the characters, and that it didn't feel tacked on. Like I wasn't like, oh, I can see the seam there between Michael Reeves' script and what Ryan and Marshall are doing. I didn't get that sense at all. In fact, if I hadn't have researched after that, I wouldn't have realized that wasn't part of the original episode. To be honest, yeah.
Is it okay if I talk about what happened and why we made those decisions? Because some people, are you great?
Yeah. Spoilers, people. So it's, skip forward if you don't want to know. So go ahead.
Okay. Well, the whole idea of the kids going back, I went through my head and it occurred to me that Hank is very likely to stay. Somebody who's the ranger, he's a leader, a warrior. But then I thought his job was the leader of this group of kids. And his last job, I believe, is to lead them home through the pool. Right. Diana, I really didn't see a reason for her to stay because Kosar had left the realm. He was her love interest, and it sounded like she would see him again, but it almost sounded like they would meet in another kind of life, maybe another realm or another age to come. Eric, if Eric was to stay, it would almost be like too subversive because he always wanted to go home.
Yeah, he wanted to go home so bad.
For him to just decide at the end he's going to stay, it almost would seem like it wouldn't make sense with his character.
I agree. Eric wanted to get home so bad.
I could see Bobby, Bobby wanted to go home, even though I think he liked being a barbarian and would miss Uni. I know that he wanted to go home, and Sheila wouldn't stay in the realm, especially if Bobby was going home. And that left Presto. And the episode, The Last Illusion, of course, was something that really impressed me as a kid. And the idea that Varla and Presto would not be together was, just heartbreaking to me.
Right.
And if you watch that episode again, there's something that even people on the fan page have pointed out. There's a big plot hole because Dungeon Master is speaking to Presto, and he says to him that, she is blessed with wondrous power that would grow as she grows. Find her, and you may find the way home. What was very fascinating about that episode is there was never any hint anywhere of a portal home. There was never. And I got to thinking about it. I was like, oh my, this is either a plot hole or this is a segue into Presto staying, because find her and you'll find the way home. Varla is Presto's home.
Right.
So
that's why you show a nice little scene where he kind of crests a ridge and he looks down at her, and they reunite. And you also put a nice little thing in there. You did some callbacks to other episodes that only fans would get, like where Bobby is holding the pendant and looking at it before he goes home, and things like that. Basically, I'll leave one spoiler unspoiled just in case. But Presto stays because I think he feels at back in the real world he feels sort of out of place, but he's feeling it like I'm more in place here than I really was at home. That's kind of my takeaway from it. Awkward kid and all that. Plus, he has a chance to become somebody very like he can grow into himself here, right? The whole thing about the hat was him growing and learning and all of that, or one of the aspects of it. But he has a mentor. I won't say who the mentor is, unless you just want to, if there's a good storytelling reason why you went with it there.
There's a real good. I mean, well, if you said spoiler, this is another spoiler. Harkening back to the first episode, and Marshall had mentioned earlier in the podcast, the very first episode, Venger pretends to be Merlin and offers Presto the opportunity to be his apprentice, and with the intent that he's going to deceive Presto and use him to destroy a village.
Right.
And I like the idea that Presto would acknowledge the idea that Venger has been redeemed, but is still kind of pokes a little fun at him and says, I want to be a real wizard. And he says, and Merlin here did promise to teach me.
Right.
Harkening back to that first episode.
So Venger does get redeemed. He goes back to his pre-Venger self, and he promises he sort of becomes Presto's mentor.
Yes.
I'll tell you one of the things that touched me a lot. Like, if anything was going to make me burble a little bit, I don't burble easy. I was burbling on the inside, but not on the outside. Presto stayed, and that gave somebody to stay with Uni.
Yeah.
Because if everybody went home, Uni was left by herself.
Yeah.
And you could hand wave it and say, and Dungeon Master found some unicorns for her. But those were her friends. And so she still has Presto. So exactly. I like that a lot,
And they had that one adventure together, Presto Spells Disaster. So they've got a connection to it.
But and home is where the heart is too. So
what about you, Marshall? Did Marshall contribute anything to the ending ideas, or
when I bounced this stuff? Oh, I'm sorry. Well,
no, go ahead.
Well, when I bounced this stuff off Marshall, I knew that I liked it, but I also knew very well that some people would be like, "Oh my gosh, are you serious? Are you really going to do that?" And I wanted to know from him, and we talked a little bit, and he signed off on it, and but yeah, this was an idea that I had before I even met Marshall, and I do remember. I think I told him about it on the first night I ever spoke to him. Yeah, and he was like, "Dude, this needs to happen. This really needs to happen."
Well, I don't think it would have. I think if I had written a coda, I probably wouldn't have made the same exact choices, but the way you took it, like I said, it fit. It didn't feel wrong. It didn't feel jarring. It didn't feel out of place. So
it was natural.
Yeah, it felt really good. So, all right, now, guys, you've been gracious to give me almost an hour more than we originally talked about. There's just been too much good stuff to cover here. So, but I want to draw us down now. I want to congratulate you again on what you did. As a fan, thank you. I really enjoyed it. There's so many good moments in this, and there was a script written, but a script is just a script. It's a framework, and you have to put stuff on top of it. And what you built on top of the framework, you have every right to be proud of. It's very good. And it does give closure. It gives genuine closure. Not like, oh, I was cheated. What was that? It was like, oh, that really feels like that was the final episode of the kid. And you show the kids going home. There's no doubt they made it home.
Yeah. Some people haven't watched the credits. When I look at the analytics where it shows when people are watching, it drops off very abruptly as soon as the credits start.
Yeah, and they don't.
I want to let people know you need to watch the credits because that's part of the show.
It shows and I liked how you showed them going home, but you didn't show exactly what happened the minute they got home.
Exactly.
So you get to fill that in with your with your own mind. Yeah, it's very good stuff. Okay, final question. is there anything next up your sleeves, you guys?
Marshall and I have talked about it. This took 4 years, but I think some of those years were...
Let's that sink in. 4 years. So that is so much work. And how long were you on board, Marshall?
About 3+ years.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. 4 flipping years. Wow. So enjoy it. Enjoy the enjoyment that other people are getting out of it. But yes, do you have any has this made y'all think you want to work on another project or anything?
We've talked about it a bit. A lot of it depends on, family life. My wife has been a saint dealing with a strange husband. I mean, she even helped out with some of the rotoscope work. I gave her credit in it, and she's been very gracious, and she was looking forward to having me back. But I really enjoy doing this. Marshall and I have talked about, can we make I'm 46 years old. I'm looking at retirement here after a bit. I'm like, I'd really like to do this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I'd like to make some money, but I certainly don't want to step on any intellectual property rights. We're not real sure exactly yet. We're kind of debating, talking about, what could be done. We've got ideas. We're just not sure yet. I mean, that's my take on it. Marshall.
Yeah, it's about the same. Yeah, I've always wondered what would happen in Thundercats or Silverhawks, and a myriad of other cartoons that could be ended or discontinued. So who knows what the future will bring.
All right. Well, fair enough. Well, guys, congratulations again. It's and folks, like I said, it'll be in the show notes at shaneplays.com. You can find it. Just search Dungeons and Dragons animated series, Requiem, the final episode. Look for Zetavio, Zetavio, DeLorean, Deloryan. I salute both of you for the amount of blood, sweat, and tears that you did for this without expecting any monetary compensation. You've touched a lot of people. There's a lot of people that wanted to see these kids get home. Years ago, I found that final episode script. It was a synopsis of what the script said. Wasn't the actual script itself. And I was like, I would love to have seen that. And now I have. And, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And thanks again for your time. And I hope you continue to get, good coverage and good feedback on this. And I hope that, I know you're not looking for monetary compensation, but I hope maybe this opens up some kind of door for you, for something fun for you to work on again and maybe even get paid for it. So, well, Ryan, thanks again. Marshall, thanks again. You guys are...
You're welcome.
Cool,
very welcome.
You're cool dudes in my book. And, you have put that final piece in the puzzle from an important thing for me from the 80s. So, and, you've I don't know, it's just amazing. I love it so much. And I hope that this podcast, after I edit it and get it out, it does justice to what you guys have done. All right. Well, that's it, guys. Thank you so much. And, I really, really, really appreciate your time.
Oh, thanks. Absolutely.
All right. Y'all be good. And everybody, thanks so much for listening to Shane Plays. We will catch you next time.
Shane Plays Radio is blessed to have sponsors, and we appreciate them very much. However, did you know that you can also support the show as an individual for as little as $1 an episode? Simply go to patreon.com/ShanePlays.